All right, hello and welcome to episode 13 of Dano Says So with Joe Principe. Far and away, just in terms of pure numbers, people who are familiar with Joe are going to be familiar with him by virtue of his work in Rise Against. He's also a founding member of 88 Fingers Louie, who I have some personal history with. And very exciting to me, he recently laid down the bass tracks on a few new tunes by Dead Ending, which features Dano Says So alumni Vic Bondi. So, Joe Principe, thank you for doing this.
Of course, yeah. Thanks for having me, Dan.
Yeah. Before we went on, you and I were talking a little bit about what a crazy year it's been. Chicago in particular, I was reading about today. Chicago underwent curfew. Chicago called in National Guard. So sort of the BLM / George Floyd, just racial justice upheaval has hit your town. Can you tell me about it a little bit?
Yeah, I'll say so. I live in the Chicago suburbs. With my 3 kids and my wife, and it was interesting because all this was going on, and I wanted them to know, what was going on. They were pretty aware of the situation with George Floyd and what happened, but I come from, my father, my uncle, and my grandfather they're passed on now, but they were police officers.
Really?
So in Melrose Park, Illinois, which was very mafia centric in 70s and 80s,
all right.
Like it was so you have the police officers and then you have the mafia. So everyone was like, well, how was your dad? Was he an honest cop, or was he, just kind of fell into what people seem to fall into when you're a cop and you're power hungry? From what I can tell, he wasn't like that. He was, he wanted to do the right thing. He didn't have a history of, complaints and things like that. But, growing up, I was raised to people's color of skin, like none of that mattered. But the town I grew up in was very racist. I mean, it was all Italian. It was was very Goodfellas, So like, I think growing up, because I had these these blinders on to what was going on in my town, because at a young age I ventured, this is a total tangent by the way, I ventured off.
That's what we're here for, sir. The less I talk, the better a job we're doing, I think.
Well, I at a very young age, I was like in 3rd grade. I'm walking down the street. There's a skateboard literally on the sidewalk, and I was like, oh, that looks fun. And then I just left it because it wasn't mine. Every day I would walk past it, skateboard's still there. Long story short, I stole the skateboard, learned how to skate, discovered Thrasher, Trans World. And at the same time, my sister, who's 5 years older than me, got into punk rock, Dead Kennedys, Suicidal Tendencies, even Bad Religion, Circle Jerks, like all that stuff. So at a very young age, like I loved her. Like she, I loved what she was into. I looked up to her, So I stole her tapes and I stared just getting into skateboarding.
I'm hearing a lot of theft here, Joe. Go on.
All innocent.
A lot of innocent theft. Anyway, go on, sir.
No, but I think growing up in that world at so young, I just, punk rock, you're already singing or screaming. I don't want to say screaming for change, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I was exposed to Dead Kennedy's lyrics in fucking 5th grade, and at the time I didn't really understand the gravity of what Jello Biafra was singing about. I just knew it was different, and it wasn't what my town was doing, like as just society, as you go to school, play sports, you're supposed to act this way, and God forbid people of color come into town, but like, it's like, and I did notice that growing up, but in my head, it was like, well, skateboarding didn't see any color. I just didn't think about it. But anyway, so I wanted to instill that in my kids was my point. I think that so the town I'm in now is pretty liberal as far as a Chicago suburb. It's very upper middle class probably,
Mm-hmm.
but like I said, pretty liberal. And there was a rally in town, and the weeks leading up to that, because Chicago, windows are being broken, there's looting and all this stuff, and there were people posting on the neighborhood social media page like, be careful, like they're coming, the protesters are coming. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, wait a second, there's difference between senseless looting and
Right.
peaceful protests. Like there's a point, there's a difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the country was founded on dissent. It's
Right.
like, um so I brought my kids to the rally in town, the Black Lives Matter rally, and it's funny because people are talking about like, spreading coronavirus and all this stuff. Everyone well behaved, wearing masks, keeping their distance, um, peaceful. No one's breaking windows, even though the whole town was boarding up their windows. Um, so that was my experience with that. Like, because again, having children, I'm a little bit removed, especially like what was happening in downtown Chicago, because I live about 50 minutes from there,
Okay.
maybe 45 minutes. Um, but, I think coming off the heels of quarantine, and people are fucking sick of cops beating people up and killing people, it's just everything came to a head. And of
Mm-hmm.
course you're going to get violence. It was like inevitable, you know?
There are a couple of things I take away from what you were saying right there, which is first off, you gave a long preamble, which you needn't be apologetic for, about sort of how we come up. But that sort of 80s and 90s era post skater American hardcore group of people, there was kind of a big save the world vibe going there, and like
Yeah,
a real like belief that some attempt at moral ascendancy was an obligation in doing that music or being part of it, right?
yeah, absolutely.
This year has sort of exposed who is phoning it in and who truly lives that. And I don't mean by who chose to be the boots on the ground, but the fact that some people have swung around and now aggressively post the most paranoid, myopic, counterpoints to everything they've said for 30 running years, simply because they're worried about the wrong boots on their lawn.
Yep.
You know.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's also being in the band Rise Against,
Mm-hmm.
people are like, "Oh, you're in Rise Against. Why aren't you doing this, this, and this?" It's like, well, yeah, we are politically outspoken. We are socially aware, and we like to, our job, I think, is to present facts,
Mm-hmm.
factual information. Don't force feed anything to anybody, because you're just going to they're going to spit it back up. You can't force feed anything to anyone. You could try, but people more times than not are going to be like, fuck off.
I think you're right. I think it's a faulty method.
Yeah, and growing up in Chicago, I I loved Los Crudos as a band, what they stood for, political hardcore. They didn't, they were singing to their scene and their neighborhood. They didn't sing in English.
Mm-hmm.
Martin from Los Crudos. Um, it's funny because 88 Fingers Louie and Los Crudos played so many shows together, but obviously, like 88 Fingers Louie was very skate punk, no effectsy.
No,
You
there's a
know,
contrast there. There's at least in terms of sound, there absolutely is.
there's a contrast, but we had the common bond, right? Of like, no, like fuck racism, fuck this. Like I guess in my head it was common sense things. It was like, well, yeah, like who cares what someone's skin color is, and who cares? I guess just the live and let live kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but at the same time, like if someone's, I don't know, I guess it's live and let live. But if I'm going to see something that's I don't agree with, I'm Italian. I have to speak up. I have to open my mouth. But my point was, Martin from Los Crudos, he would explain every song before they played it. So you would have like, it was a showstopper. It was like, here's a song, and it was raging, and then he would stop and explain the next song. And when I was younger, I was like, I love Martin to death. He is the sweetest guy in the world, but please just play the song. And now it's like, no, he had to do that because they were singing in Spanish, and half the crowd couldn't speak Spanish. Like, so fuck me for getting pissed for not letting him speak his mind, but again, young and stupid, but I understand the relevance, like why the need to do that. So I don't, that's needed in that instance, I guess.
It's an interesting thing, and I think sometimes it's a personal evolution. Like when in hardcore bands when I was younger, I was notorious amongst a microscopic group of people, but for the things that I would say on stage in between songs, right?
Yeah.
With Shiner's Club, I might as well fucking be Dean Martin up there, because it's a non-political statement. It's a band that exists to exist in personal demons, and it has no place. In finding that I'm doing an apolitical band, and I'm not trying to circle this around to me, it's kind of opened up my perspective to the fact that it's really odd for any artists to mandate the presentation of other artists, which it took me a long time to arrive at, which is, can you sort of not associate yourself with people whose views you find morally repugnant? Yeah, absolutely. But their methodology, it's none of your fucking business.
It's true.
Yeah.
And that's what makes every band different too. It's delivery, and it's if we were all doing if we were all doing the same thing, it would be boring. It absolutely would. And it's kind of like a style. And I think especially when you're a front man in a punk band or hardcore band, I think what I noticed growing up is their personal style, just as a person, the mannerisms, that always carries to stage, and that's what makes a band, that's what makes Naked Raygun, and Articles of Faith. It's who they are, and I don't want every band to be the same. I don't want safe. Like I want, I want to be exposed to all kinds of assholes and super intelligent, insightful people, and I want to be exposed to all of it because you learn from it.
Let's seize upon the examples right there. You're naming, you talk about Crudos, but you also talk about your own band and 88 Fingers Louie at the time, and just now you mentioned Naked Raygun, you mentioned Articles of Faith. In American hardcore and American punk rock, people will usually mention Boston, they will always mention New York, and they will often mention California. Chicago is a goldmine of influential music.
Yeah.
But is seemingly left to its own devices and not, in my opinion, included in the national conversation the way it should be. You think that's true?
I think it's 100% true. And I've had this discussion so many times, over the years, and I don't know if it was just the lack of touring, because Articles of Faith definitely toured, a lot. And I know they got out there. I think Naked Raygun, they were limited on getting out to the West Coast. Not limited, but they only went out there a couple times, maybe.
I don't remember if I saw them. I know I saw Big Boy, which impressed me because they weren't touring on much,
Yeah. Yeah. Peg Boy. Oh, I love Peg Boy, but they, I know they got they were on a Social Distortion tour, and Jay Robbins has played bass for him on that tour. But I think, I don't know if it was not laziness, but kind of laziness. There was a lot of bands just stayed in Chicago.
Interesting.
Naked Raygun would hit the East Coast because it was easy for them to get out there. It was short drives, and they can take off of work. Just being friends with them, now, better friends now than I was, when I was a younger guy. I didn't really know them then. And talking to, I think Screeching Weasel got out there because they got on Lookout Records, and they toured a lot. I think they were, before us, 88 Fingers Louie and Alkaline Trio and those kind of bands, before we existed, I think Alkaline Trio or Screeching Weasel kind of carried the torch, you know, like
they didn't even occur to me when I was giving the setup, but it illustrates my point.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because there is a lost sound. Not it's I don't want to say sound. There are lost factions of Chicago punk rocks that people don't understand. Like Rise Against is heavily influenced by Naked Raygun and Peg Boy and Articles of Faith, and you would never know it though. And every band from Chicago sounded different. Big Black didn't sound like Naked Raygun, didn't sound like the Effigies, and it's like Effigies toured a lot. I'll say
I saw
that.
the Effigies at the Olympic in California, which seeing anything at the Olympic is something you'll never forget.
Oh well, yeah, and then there was the beef between Articles of Faith and Effigies, you know, which you know, like Vic Bondi, you know, our mutual friend.
Yeah.
He always said, he's like, those guys were like the right wing kind of contingency, you know, for our scene, and we were the other way, so we would always butt heads.
Yeah.
And now John Kesty, the singer, he was I don't know if he was like a DA in Chicago or something, and you know, but anyway, I do agree. Like a lot of those bands just got lost over the years, other than the Effigies and Articles of Faith because of American hardcore coming out, you know, and all that, like the documentary.
Right.
I mean, I always say this: Articles of Faith is a band. If you're a Rise Against fan or a fan of aggressive music, do yourself a favor and listen to Articles of Faith, because they were doing stuff Gang of Four-esque before Fugazi was a band,
right.
You know, and people it's like they don't understand that. And go ahead.
No, now that he and I know, I'm just chiming in to support. Now that, you know, we've done the podcast together, we're working on episodes and we're conversational, and he's, you know, been kind enough to tell me some complimentary things here and there. I confess to it and be able to laugh about it. But I will tell you, as much as I feel like I can call anybody in the punk rock world and hold my own and hold a conversation, I was nervous getting ready to interview Vic. You know, coming in cold, interview me, honey, I was intimidated as hell. You know, so I get it. I mean, by the sheer size of the guy's brain, by the intensity of his howl, and by his musical history, I was like, okay, fuckwad, you said you wanted this interview, let's do it. You know.
Yeah, Vic is a sweetheart, but very intimidating. I mean, me getting in the room with him the first time when Dead Ending first started was so. It was for me. I mean, I was acting like a nervous kid. You know, like I couldn't really focus on playing bass. I remember staring at Derek, our drummer, and not looking at Vic, because I just kept thinking, like, this dude wrote like my father's dreams. You know, this dude wrote Every Man for Himself. It's like, fuck. But you know, again, I like to think over the years, I was able to learn from people like Vic, you know, and you know, it's what an honor being a part of that band, for sure.
Yeah. So I know that you were an original. So you brought it up, and it's an ideal segue. I believe you were an original member in Dead Ending, and I know you swung back to do this recent material. What's that whole experience like, and what has dictated your being a part of it and not being a part of it?
I think, okay, so Jeff Dean, the guitar player, who I know Jeff because Jeff was in a band called The Story So Far with Dennis from 88 Fingers Louie. After 88 broke up, Jeff moved to Chicago he grew up in Las Vegas. You know, he's in Faded Gray, that hardcore band. He moved to Detroit because he was buddies with the Suicide Machines, like that band, the ska band. And then
familiar with them.
But they're very good, politically driven, you know, ska punk hardcore band.
Dude, that's on me. My musical tunnel vision is shameful. Like,
well,
I like it. It's hard to get me out of my groove. You know. Yeah,
and I would say for some people, and I include myself in this, there's the stigma that goes along with being ska punk. So I was never like. I liked Operation Ivy a whole lot.
I was going to say there's only one exception to that. There's only one exception to that rule, sir.
Like, it's interesting, but Suicide Machines, they kind of snuck their way in as they
Okay.
got my respect over the years. But my point is, so Jeff moved to Chicago um, with Derek, who was the drummer of Suicide Machines. Derek was also in Alkaline Trio, and Derek also was the drummer, or is the drummer of Dead Ending, Derek Grant. And so Jeff had this idea, like, to start a hardcore band with Bondi, because Articles of Faith, and Vic needs to be
Right.
screaming his head off about something. So Jeff knew I was a huge Articles of Faith fan, and we were just buddies, like we over the years, like we like a lot of the same music. And he liked the way I play bass, so he asked me to join about 5 years ago, maybe. And with our schedules, it was so difficult to get all of us to record, to write, play shows. I think we've only played like 3 shows, like Chicago, Detroit, and then they played. I did 2 Chicago shows and then Detroit, and that was it. And that was over the span of 5 years. So after like 3 years, I like Jeff, he kept trying to like rally the troops and get together, but Rise Against was always gone touring. And I said, I don't want to hold you back. I'm like, so I'll take a step back, if you want to get someone else so you guys can play more.
Right.
And then they got Nate from Ensign to play bass. And that lasted, and they kind of fizzled out a little bit. They never broke up. And then recently Bondi was getting all fired up, being in quarantine. And he's like, let's do a Dead Ending EP. And he and Jeff wrote some songs, and Nate wasn't able to do it. So Jeff got me back in the mix. He's like, hey, you're probably home doing nothing. Do you want to play on this EP? And we all just recorded in our parts separately, Jeff sent me the drum tracks and the guitar tracks, and I just played bass over that in my home studio. And
because it's got a very immediate, very, for lack of a cornier term, old school, cohesive sound. So it kind of catches me off guard.
Yeah, no, it's whatever we did. It definitely, the mood was captured correctly. Like it's probably my favorite thing that we've done with me and the band. It was like no fucking around.
Right.
Here it is.
And it did take some sand to cover the Clash, man.
I didn't realize this. So that was Jeff's idea to cover that, right? And Bondi wasn't sure. He wasn't on board at first.
You wouldn't have been able to get me to touch it with a gun to my head, but you guys pulled it off.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. It was Vic. Yeah, Vic did a good job. It's a hard song to sing, with the same delivery that the Clash had.
Well, there's just certain shadows you don't want to stand in, but you guys crushed it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So, talking about, in some ways, all roads lead to Rise Against. What is trippy to me, you and I have exposure to each other, 20-something years ago. Yeah. And then, like a lot of people our age, although I think I'm a little bit older than you are, but it's really the internet that's allowed us to socialize again, and to sort of, run around giving mutual tips of the hat. You and I played together in a fucking bowling alley.
Yep. We sure fucking, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Fireside.
We've gone in 2 directions since then, sir. And I'm very curious. I know it wasn't immediate. I know it wasn't overnight. I know there was a ladder to be climbed, or a staircase, or a pathway, or a mountain trail involved in where Rise Against started and where Rise Against has landed. It has to have been a strange journey for someone who's been exposed to the various spaces you've been exposed to.
Yeah, so it's funny because it is, when you put it that way, like it's been a crazy journey, but in my head it's like it's just this normal kind of progression. And by progression I mean, so when 88 Fingers Louie played with Speak at the Fireside, that was a time when I was trying to introduce more hardcore influences to 88 sound. Our last record had a lot of like hardcore songs on it. And then, it's funny because growing up in Chicago, I wasn't exclusive to a sound. It's like I loved West Coast punk. I love West
Mm-hmm.
Coast hardcore with, of course, Uniform Choice. And then I loved East Coast. I mean, Agnostic Front, all that stuff. And then the DC sound. I think living in the middle of the country, it was just easy for me to get all these influences thrown at me
Right.
by various people. So I think when 88 broke up, the second time, because we broke up for a little bit in '96, and then we got back together, and then we played with you guys with Speak. After putting out like another record or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was so submerged in wanting to do something along the lines of like what 7 Seconds was doing with, the positive message,
Right.
just like that, waving that flag, I wanted to, I don't want to say more meaningful, because I think 88 Fingers Louie's lyrics got more serious as
Mm-hmm.
we went on as a band. Like I think they were maybe a little bit more introspective with Dennis, the way he wrote his lyrics or whatever.
Okay.
But I think 88 broke up, and it's interesting. We broke up, but what happened was we kicked Dennis out of the band, and then we wanted to continue with a different singer.
Mm-hmm.
And we realized, Dan, our guitar player, and myself, we realized like, we have to start fresh. Like, why do this? It's replacing
Okay.
the singer is the hardest thing in the world. So we had this demo of 7 songs that were 88 Fingers Louie songs, like musically.
Mm-hmm.
And we were trying out singers, and as for a new band. And then we tried out like 20 dudes. And then I think I actually ran into Tim, our singer. Like I knew Tim through his now wife, but then girlfriend, because Aaron, his girl or his wife, was a big 88 fan, so she was always
Okay.
hanging out with us. She was super cool, and I ran into him at in Indianapolis, out of all places, with Sick of It All, AFI, Indecision, and Hot Water Music toured together, and I drove up to hang out with AFI and those dudes,
Mm-hmm.
and Tim was there to see Indecision. And
Okay.
I'm like, hey, you want to try out for this band I'm starting? And then everyone was like, that's not going to work. His influences are so different and your influences are different. And then I think that's why it worked, is because it was the melding of that. It pushed his influences growing up with listening to like Psychic Kato and the Midwest emo scene,
Okay.
more art. I don't want to say arty music, but not so straightforward. Although he did grow up listening to Minor Threat and
Mm-hmm.
Descendants and those bands, but he was very into like Fugazi and the 90s period Discord
Right.
stuff.
Okay.
So I think his influences, my influences, just kind of gelled, and it was an extension of 88. Is my point, because that's the direction I wanted 88 to go in. So we started this. We tried to play more hardcore shows. We toured with Boy Sets Fire and The Movie Life and Thursday.
You're
We toured. I
reminding me
was
what a you're reminding me what a trippy time that was. A lot of these are
Yeah,
names that I haven't
totally.
heard in years. Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely like we felt a little bit like a fish out of water with being. We wanted to be straightforward hardcore, and at least I did. and it was a little bit of fish out of water, but we did tour, with Sick of It All, and those dudes helped us out immensely. They took us to Europe for our first time.
Yeah.
And we were trying very hard, right? So Fat Mike, my relationship with Fat Mike from 88 Fingers Louie helped us get on Fat, so we did our first 2 records on Fat, and we're like, okay, like we don't want to be locked into like the Fat record sound, because obviously they had a sound. It was Lagwagon, and
Without knowing the history, Rise Against and Fat's an odd mix.
yeah. Wait, let's say it again.
If you don't know the history, if you don't know the genealogy there, it could be argued that no matter what period of Rise Against you're talking about, it's still a weird fit with Fat Records.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, I think at the time Mike signed Anti-Flag, and he had Good Riddance, which obviously you interviewed Russ. Russ is very outspoken. They're very political, so we felt a little bit of camaraderie with those guys, and then he signed a Veil, a very obviously very political.
Right.
Uh, um, So that was a time when Fat was trying to branch out and get away from that no effectsy sound, you know, although I did admittedly grow up liking that sound, you know, like there was a part of me that liked that. Um, so, you know, as Mike was expanding Fat and we grew our sound a little bit, and after our second record, it was like we went to Europe with the Mad Caddies from Santa Barbara, right? They're ska band. They were on Fat Records.
Okay.
There was a voice message on my answering machine from DreamWorks, and it was this A&R guy, and I was like, "Is someone fucking with me? Like, is this one of my friends?" Like, yeah,
Right.
this is Ron from DreamWorks or whatever. And I was like, no way. So I called this dude back, and he's like, "Hey, your record Revolutions Per Minute like fell on my desk. You know, like I like what you guys are doing." And I was like, all right, like Thrice with the signing of Thrice and Thursday, like every A&R guy was trying to sign bands. Like I get it.
Right.
It's something we didn't seek out. We didn't like, my goal was to play to as many people as we could in the venue we were booked at. I didn't have I didn't have my sights set on stadiums or a major label record release, any of that.
Well, to my perception, the first switch that really flipped, or something that was really instrumental in taking you from one type of room to another, and I could be totally wrong, but it seems like the Warped Tour and the radical growth of the Warped Tour played a big role for you guys.
It did. So it's kind of what happened to us is,
which one of us is going to know, me or you? You.
Well, well, no, you're right, because I think we had two different experiences on Warped Tour. We had the Warped Tour when we first started. We were playing the Volcom stage, and we're playing in front of literally 10 people. And then our major label debut came out when we signed to DreamWorks. After we're like, we actually worked out a deal. Our deal with DreamWorks, which was only DreamWorks for a month, and they got melded into Geffen. So
I knew about that.
Yeah, so we were like, oh shit, like we're gonna get dropped. We didn't get dropped. Our deal was total artistic control for like less money. We didn't want the big payday. Like we wanted to be. I
negotiated a baby version of that in my own history, so I understand it. I was lucky because my mother was a contract lawyer, so I was like, I've got free legal services to nail this thing down the way I want it. But I'm just saying, I understand what you had to do and that you could do it. So, pardon the interruption.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, you know, at the end of the day, you know, obviously we made the right choice, because when you're in debt to the label, they're on you. They want that money back. They're the bank. You know, they want to make their money back. But when it's like less of like a loss, they kind of they literally let us be. Like we were still touring on the Warped Tour to 30 people. And then our singles didn't really work out, you know, on that major label debut, until someone at the label is like, hey, there's this acoustic song on the record. Let's just put it out there and see what happens as a last resort. And we're like, shit, we're going to be like those guys where we have this acoustic song, and then we're going to be the one-hit wonders. And it caught on right away, and we were like, oh shit. So stuff started taking off, which led to venues, you know, capacities increasing and getting billed higher on the Warped Tour every year that we played after that. And it gave us a little leverage, you know, so we came off the heels of the successful single, writing a new record. They left us alone. Like we never demoed for the label. We've never turned in a demo to when we were on Geffen and Interscope, because then we ended up on Interscope. So we just kept doing what we were going to do, whether we were on Fat, Epitaph, or any label, and it just worked, you know, like, because our record after that, we ended up having like 3, you know, huge singles, you know, not acoustic. They were actually rock singles, but we were still playing punk rock.
It cracked me up when I was researching for the interview today, because I was like, you know, can't really talk to him about Fireside Bowl and deep dish pizza for 30 minutes. You know, so I'm gonna have to get my technical facts straight. And the further you get into the story, it starts referencing, every article I would read would start referencing where certain records or certain singles charted, right? Like where they would land on Billboard. And I was like, you know, that's not a language I speak real fluently.
It was in my head, I mean, it was nuts. I mean, you know, because we all came from where you come from, like playing VFW hall
Right.
shows. So to be submerged in that world, and then you're playing radio shows, you know, like K-Rock, you know, radio shows. We were doing the Inland Invasion with like whoever, you know, and I was like, what are we doing? Like, it felt so like fish out of water. And then it just started catching on. And I was like, man, like it was just, it was just surreal, you know?
Well,
And
has there been a point, as the spaces have grown, as the size of the backing has grown, I understand you had creative freedoms and you had to protect it in your contract, but has there ever been a point of friction where sort of the band's you know, pronounced social conscience and sort of political identity has made the people involved with you nervous or resistant in any way?
no, we've been pretty lucky, because I think from their perspective, for, you know, it was, for lack of a better term, it was their unique marketing tool. You know,
Yeah.
it was like it was their, you know, that's how we
Your
stood
conscience was your
apart.
hook?
Yeah, basically, like,
Okay.
because they had their Weezers and their Jimmy Eat World, and you know,
Right.
they had bands doing safer music. I mean, I love Jimmy Eat World. Don't get me wrong.
They slept in my living room in Orange County. I didn't really know them. The guys I lived with did. But every time, it's another one of those things where I'll be doing one of these interviews and somebody will say something, I'll be like, God, man, there was a time when the world was microscopic.
Yep. Oh, for sure. I mean, yeah, those dudes, they come from hardcore and punk rock too. Like, great guys. But I think they saw the label going back to, you know, our political, just being outspoken. And I think we were kind of like the bratty kids, like, oh, let's use this platform and ruffle feathers as much as we can.
Right.
Like we actually had the army, because we kind of made the crowd turn on the army recruiting at Warped Tour, and they got kicked off, or they left the Warped Tour because of us, and they pulled their sponsorship money from Kevin Lyman. And we kind of we got in trouble. What's that?
I would say, how was that? And go ahead, keep going.
Well,
Although I love hearing that. That's like, you know.
So they were making, you know, they were doing, like, they had this tent at Warped Tour, and they were doing like push-up contests with, you know, kids, and pull-up contests, and they were making people sign their little, like, their mailing list, which basically was, they were trying to get kids to sign up for the fucking army. So we saw this from stage, and Tim, our singer, was like, basically, he just started talking shit, and he was like, see those guys right there? And he, you know, he pointed at them, and I forgot what he said exactly, but whatever he said turned into cups of pee getting thrown at the army tent. And they left.
Right.
Like, they like, it's like they're the army, and they left because these teenagers were assaulting them with cups of pee.
Well, I mean, there's a small space within an entity that I don't know how I feel about it. I've never been to one. I've never attended the Warped Tour. I know a lot of people who do a lot of work with people who were pivotal in it, right?
Yeah.
But there's a point where the kid's true punk rock nature serves them. So, you know, I'm going to give the Dano thumbs up to throwing pits at the army at the Warped Tour.
But I do think we use those venues and that platform, you know, for, at least in my head, the common good. Like, so when we were on Warped Tour, we aligned ourselves with PETA, you know, and we did signings only at the PETA 10. If we were going to do a signing, like, fuck trying to sell like Rise Against merchandise, like we're going to go to the PETA 10 and to get people over there so they can read their, you know, what PETA was handing out at the time. So we just did things like that, you know, like.
Do you remember the big rash of signings in 88, 89 when, in effect, Giant, everybody was trying to pick up a hardcore band?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
That was the first time a lot of these mechanics came in, and people, you know, No for an Answer dabbled in that a little bit, but you would have label people suggesting in stores and signings and in-person appearances, and you'd want to throw up, and you'd be like, oh God, right? You know, like, it was.
Yeah.
hardcore will never forgive me if I buy into this silliness. I'm hearing good stories about from you about turning those machinations on their head and turning them into beautiful things. So I say good on you.
Thank you.
My take on this, and the bottom things on my notes, the last two things that are written are political bands, political man, right? The world is shut down and you are a professional. I ask most touring musicians and most full-time musicians this during the pandemic, but how are you dealing with that? You know,
it definitely goes in. It's been difficult because I realize, like everyone in our industry,
mm-hmm.
it's such a huge part of my life, and not having that outlet. I mean, set aside like basically being out of work, right? Like I'm not. There's no real income coming in, which is fine. I think we're lucky enough to weather the storm and get by and survive as a band. Like we'll still come out of this okay on the other end whenever that happens. I think living in the Principe household with me during this, it hasn't been very easy for my family, because they see this like there's something very absent, and that's being on stage. It's because I'm not a very vocal person, but that's how that's my release, is playing and looking like an idiot on stage, you know, like that's what I live to do.
I've hit a couple really bad depressions over the course of quarantine, and both times they were at points when I wondered whether my band, which is far less visible, but whether it would return, whether it would become functional again, and if we did, whether the venues would be there, but really whether maybe unhealthily I see my singing voice or my from the stage voice as being my more useful or therapeutic voice, and I don't know if it'll ever be returned to me, you know?
Right.
So I get it. You're like a caged beast with this crap.
Well, it's true, and then I also realize, like, when you do one thing for 30 plus years, right? Because I know you've obviously fronted, you know, bands, and then you took a break for a while, and then you went back to music. When me, I've done music, you know, I would say maybe a little less than 30 years straight. Right?
Uninterrupted? Bam.
Uninterrupted. And I realized, like, I don't, as a person, as Joe Principe, like, oh shit, like I don't have another thing.
Right. I hear you.
And like, that's kind of scary, but what it's done is it's made me, I guess, try to get out there and do a little bit more, like I hate to say it, but I'm a coffee dork, right? So like I've kind of submerged myself in barista world in my house, but like learning, like, you know, learning about how to be a barista and like things like that, like, which obviously I'm not going to be a barista full time, but I think it's just getting out there and learning new things is my point. It's made me at least get out there, or at least be more physically active, like riding my bike. Like I'll go on super long rides, like 40 miles, 50 miles on the road, not like mountain biking, but like, and just kind of get out there, where when we were touring all the time, like I wouldn't want to do that or have the time. But yeah, like it's made me kind of rethink, like, life as Joe Principe, like who am I aside from the band? It's been kind of interesting. Like I've been at odds with it internally.
That's kind of powerful, but it's very real. Thank you for sharing it. It's logical. It makes sense. Okay, a man with a social conscience, a man who's in some very political bands in a political year. Before we get done doing this, how are you feeling about the election? Do you have any fears, anxieties, predictions?
I can tell you right now, I'm definitely I'm voting blue. I mean, to no surprise.
Right.
and I actually listened to, your episode with Russ about the Green Party, and I hear what he was saying about that. But I think there are so many it's bizarro world right now, right? Like, so that every day, like anyone could open the news and Trump is saying something, and at this point, it doesn't matter what context, what the topic is. It doesn't matter what he's saying. It's crazy. It's like it's that what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost like this manipulation technique, right? Where someone says something and then they say polar opposite, and then they keep going back and forth to confuse their audience. That way the audience starts tuning them out. It's a very like Putin kind of thing.
It very much is.
Like, and that's what's happening. And unfortunately, I have family members that are kind of buying into it, which, they'll probably listen to
be
this.
tough.
Yeah, it is. And it's disheartening, because I think if you have common sense and you have just social or just kindness in your heart, you wouldn't go that way. I mean, he clearly is I mean, I don't know, sociopath. I don't know. I don't.
There is a base meanness to the culture he's created,
exactly.
or that he's championed, or however you want to put it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and when you have someone saying like, pandemic is whatever, it's not a big deal, it's going to go away when it warms up, and then maybe you should try injecting bleach to make it go away. Like, I mean, is he like knowingly fucking with people, or is he truly just off his rocker? Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, part of me just thinks it's like I have a musician friend who he's so close to my heart, and he's loved by many people. I don't want to say his name, but he purposely will play dumb on, but he's the smartest guy in the room to get a reaction, right?
Right.
And it's like, is Trump nuts, or is he on this crazy level of fuckery where like he just
I think, unfortunately, that you can accomplish more through force of personality than you can through the power of your intelligence.
yeah. Okay.
I think that Germany in the 30s is the classic example of that. I've always thought that people disqualified themselves whenever they drew parallels between Adolf Hitler and whoever their political opponent might be. It's a cheap gimmick. To me, it was always disqualifying until now.
Absolutely.
I even then, I don't know if I'm full of shit in going there. To that end, I've booked an interview with a professor of history whose area of expertise is the evolution of the Nazi Party and of anti-Semitism.
Wow.
Yeah, his name's Gabriel Rosenfeld, and we're setting the date right now. And I'm over the moon to hear what parallels he draws, and hoping that if it moves the needle for even one listener away from Trump, I'll feel like I did a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going somewhere that circled back to you and I's discussion, but it's a hell of a thing to have a political conscience your whole life, and then in your 40s or 50s, after the end of, Nemesis Records and racism T-shirts and things like that, to suddenly be living through another era of larger and more sustained race rioting, living under the most openly hateful regime this country has presented in our lifetimes. It's a mind bender.
Yeah, it's like my heart breaks for my kids, is obviously, especially like any parent who doesn't buy into the bullshit that's going on. Like, of course, for me, having a daughter, when pre-election, when he's telling guys to grab girls by their pussies and all that stuff, it's like, wait, that's the red flag. Like, why is he like, why did he move past that? And then I cannot remember the name of that guy that he was with, the guy interviewing Trump when he said grab him by the pussy.
Billy something or other. It was on one of the entertainment magazine shows.
Yeah, yeah, right, exactly. So he got fired. Trump became president. Like, what's wrong with that picture?
Right.
Um, so it's funny. We were Rise Against was recording our last record in Nashville, Tennessee, the night of the election,
Mhm.
and none of us watched it because we're like, Hillary is totally, it's shoo-in. It's, there's no way Trump's going to win.
Right. Right.
And I woke up to Trump being our president in Nashville, well, Franklin, Tennessee, where they already had Trump signs everywhere. It was like kind of crazy to wake up and be in Rise Against and be in Franklin, Tennessee, where it's very right leaning. And then
Day one
I'm
of the
driving
era
like,
of Trump.
yeah, well, yeah, like, and then I'm driving to the studio and there's literally Trump signs on every farm. And I was like, holy shit. Like, did I die? Am I in hell? Like, what is this? But I didn't die. And yeah.
So after Fireside Bowl, is this a false memory, or did we go out for deep dish somewhere?
Oh my God. We went to Congress Pizza, which
Okay.
that's where that was my go-to. Yeah, Congress Pizza or this place Giordano's Pizza.
Mhm.
But Congress is where I would take people because it was right by Fireside Bowl around the corner and they could accommodate. They were always empty because it was kind of a weird place and
Mhm.
I could always get a large party in there.
But what I remember was you being extremely proud of it and you really showing your Chicago to a deep, deep level. But
Yeah,
anyway, go on.
I think I mean there's definitely a deep dish pride, obviously, and I'll forever fight with the Bouncing Souls and Ensign and Sick of It All over East Coast pizza versus Chicago pizza. To this day, me and Craig from Sick of It All still fight about
All
pizza.
right. Fair
So
enough.
like, yeah, I mean, so that anyway, but yeah, I think it was a way of me showing a little bit of the city to some out of towners, because I brought a lot of bands to that place.
Okay. Well, here
Yeah,
here is the cheesy segue du jour. Um, I worry that the venues are never coming back. I wonder whether I ever get a chance at my small stage and you at your varied stages again. But if we do, and we're ever in the same state, next time I'm buying. All right.
thanks, Dan.
All right. Cool. Well, listen, Joe. Thank you so much for doing this. It was a real delight.
Yeah, thanks. Nice to see you.
Okay. Take care.
Take care.